Okay, story time. So when my husband and I first got married, which is like a couple of years ago, we did a little experiment with ourselves. And looking back, do I question our decisions? Maybe a little bit. But we were both coming off of, well, my husband was coming off of a season of burnout, and I have been continually in and out of burnout for the past like 3 or 4 years. So, we definitely had a lot of, I think, baggage when it came to like time and alarms and just like being, tied to a clock. And so for our first little bit of marriage, we had this thing where in the apartment where we were living, we didn't have any clocks. So it doesn't mean we didn't have anything that told time. Like we had phones, we had our computers. So when I was working, I knew what time it was. I was able to get to meetings on time. I worked from home. And also like my phone, had the time on it and had my calendar. So I knew what time it was throughout the day, or if I had my phone. But if, it was after that, or I didn't have my phone, which I lose my phone all the time, I didn't necessarily know. There was one clock in the apartment on our stove. And when we moved in, it was set to the wrong time and we never fixed it. And I never figured out like what the actual like hour difference was. So we would go to bed and get up and, not necessarily know what time it was. And in our minds, we were like, this is going to make us feel less stressed, right? Like we're not going to be constantly obsessing over what time it is. And we're just going to kind of enjoy our lives and live. And you may be thinking like, Julianne, as you were running this experiment, how did you get any sleep? Which is a great question because I have a tendency to just stay up as long as I humanly can. And that's not because I'm necessarily a night owl. I'm not. I just I get working on something and then I don't want to quit. I want to, keep watching that show or keep crocheting that thing or keep writing that novel or whatever I'm doing. So that was a concern for me as we were talking about this. And so my husband set little routines on our Alexa devices. It would remind us to get ready for bed. It would remind us to go to bed. It would dim the lights because we had some smart lights attached to it. And, they would go from cold white to warm white. I don't think is it actually called cold white? I don't know. But anyway, so we would kind of live with these rhythms, but of course we could override it. We could always tell her to turn the lights back on if we didn't want to go to bed when she turned them off. But for the most part, she would do that and then we would know, okay, we have to go to bed soon. And then, of course, she would wake us up with music in the morning. So for basically the entire time we lived in that apartment, we had no clocks out that we bought or brought. We didn't have an alarm clock. We just had Alexa. We didn't, check the clock too much. During the evening, we just had Alexa tell us. And I will say this for it. I do think that it was a helpful reset in terms of I do not stress about time the same way that I did before we did that. I can be really about time, about everything, honestly. And so, doing things on schedule and on time can be that way. And that's not healthy for me. That's not the way that I want to live my life. And so that was a helpful thing for me to do. Do I think I could have done it another way? Probably, yes. But it was helpful, right? To just know hey, don't bother checking the time because there's nothing to check here. However, it did have the side effect that I think most of us would expect. And that was that when we had to get out of the house on time for something and, we weren't already working or on our phones, it was really hard. For example, going to church every week was really difficult for me because Alexa would give us a reminder to go to church. But we had about 10 or 15 minutes of leeway in there. And I knew that. I wouldn't usually be ready when the reminder went off because I wouldn't know when I got up how much time I had to prepare. And so then I would, take more time than we had to get ready to get out the door. And there were a lot of things like that. And so we were late a lot to things while we were doing that. All in all, I would say, it's kind of a fun experiment, especially if you have a week or two to just kind of, hide all your clocks or not have any. But if there are things in your life where you're like, this is really important for me to get here on time, to show respect or to not be embarrassed or, just to let people know that I care about them, and you don't want to be obsessing over time, then just get a clock. Just get a clock. They're still good. I'm all about like not being tied to a clock or a calendar as much as you can, but they're helpful tools. They exist for a reason. So I hope you have enjoyed this experiment recap. Feel free to send me any questions about like how it worked or that you have about like why we did this. I may not be able to answer those, but I will try. See ya.